I turned down the biggest promotion of my life to move across the world with him. 1 week later, I found a Cartier ring engraved with another woman's name. She thought she was his fiancée too. So we teamed up. Now he's jobless, exposed, and begging for privacy on a story that's gone global. I still can't believe I'm actually writing this. I've rewritten this entire thing 4 times because every version makes me sound either painfully naive or straight up unhinged. But the truth is, I was in love. Stupid. Tunnel vision, jump off a cliff if you say it's romantic love. His name was Micah. We met 2.5 years ago at a networking event in DC. You know, one of those dry, overpriced mixers with weak wine and too many khaki blazers. He was working with an international nonprofit, casually mentioned he spoke 4 languages, and somehow still managed to be goofy in that charming, confident way. I told him I liked his tortoise-shell glasses. He told me I had main character energy. I should have run then. We clicked instantly. The kind of instant where people roll their eyes and say, "Ugh, you're that couple." Our first date turned into an all-nighter. Our second date ended with pancakes at a 24-hour diner. By the end of month 3, we were spending almost every night at each other's place. At 6 months, I gave him the spare key to my apartment. He never gave me his, but I didn't ask. I trusted him. I work in corporate marketing worked. At the time, I was up for a director position at my firm. A huge leap. More money, my own team, a corner office. But then came the conversation. Micah told me he'd been offered a dream position in Barcelona, European director of programming for the same nonprofit he'd been with for years. It was everything he'd worked toward, but he didn't want to go alone. I still remember his exact words. "I don't want a career win if it means losing you." Cue me, melting into a rom-com puddle on the couch. We stayed up all night, talking through logistics. He'd already gotten approval for me to get a partner visa. I could freelance remotely. He made it sound effortless, like we were just picking a new apartment, not rewriting our entire futures. There were moments I hesitated. Of course I did. I'd worked so hard for that promotion. But every time I expressed doubt, Micah would kiss my forehead and whisper, "We're building something bigger than a job." So I turned it down. I handed in my resignation. I hugged my coworkers goodbye and smiled through their surprised expressions. And on February 9th, I landed in Barcelona with 2 giant suitcases, a duffel bag, and a heart full of adrenaline-fueled optimism. The first week was a whirlwind. Our Airbnb was this gorgeous rooftop apartment with little yellow tiles in the kitchen and ivy climbing up the balcony wall. He called it our launch pad before we found a permanent place. We ate tapas late at night. We wandered the Gothic quarter like tourists. He even took my photo in front of a bookstore with the caption, "She's the plot twist." But on day 6, Micah left his suitcase unzipped, and everything started unraveling. I didn't go snooping, I swear. That's the part that still makes my skin crawl, how accidental it all was. It was day 6 in Barcelona. I was jet-lagged, running on café con leche, and a little too much blind hope. We'd spent the morning walking around El Born, and when we got back to the Airbnb, Micah said he needed to head into the office for a few hours. I stayed behind, half unpacking, half scrolling through freelance job boards, convincing myself this temporary chaos was the price of adventure. Then his suitcase caught my eye. It was still sitting at the foot of the bed, mostly zipped but not fully, like he'd meant to close it and got distracted. A corner of his navy blazer poked out. I walked over, intending to just tuck it in. That's all. But as I lifted the flap, something shiny caught the light. A small red box. Velvet. Square. Cartier. My heart did that weird stutter-skip thing. Half excitement, half confusion. We hadn't talked seriously about getting engaged, but we'd danced around the idea before. He once joked about proposing under the Eiffel Tower when we were in Paris someday. Maybe this was that someday? My fingers moved before I could think better of it. I opened the box, and there it was. A solitaire ring. Platinum band. Flawless blinding stone. Way too expensive for a casual just-in-case gift. But what made me drop the box wasn't the diamond. It was the engraving inside the band. To Isabel. Forever, M. My brain froze. Like everything around me blurred and my body just stopped working. Isabel? There was no Isabel in his stories. No ex he ever mentioned. No cousin or friend who fit that name. I stared at the engraving for a full 30 seconds, hoping, praying that it meant something else. A family heirloom? An old mistake? Something that made sense? But then I noticed a receipt tucked beneath the ring box from a boutique jeweler in Barcelona, dated 2 weeks ago, charged to his credit card. Delivery address: a residential building in Gracia. I sat on the bed, clutching the box like it might explode. My ears were ringing. My body felt hollow. I could hear the street sounds outside, dogs barking, scooters zooming past, someone playing guitar, and it all felt painfully normal. But everything inside me was splintering. My first thought was denial. Maybe Isabel was a relative. Maybe he was helping someone propose to their partner. But that was flimsy, and I knew it. My second thought was more terrifying. What if I'm the other woman? That was when I heard the ding. Micah had left his iPad on the nightstand, still logged into his iMessages. A notification lit up the screen. Isabel, dinner still on for tonight? I've been dreaming about your risotto all day. Fiancé. Fiancé. Not boyfriend, not maybe someday. Fiancé. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I tapped the screen, heart pounding. More texts filled the screen. Conversations from weeks, months back. Her calling him babe. Him sending her selfies from what I now recognized as my apartment back in DC. Her asking when they could finally go public with their engagement. One message from him, dated 3 days ago, while I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom. Soon. I just need to handle a few things first. Promise. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't his future. I was his secret. I sat there, frozen, with the ring in one hand and his iPad in the other, watching as message after message from Isabel kept coming in. Isabel, I told my sister. She cried. Said she knew you were the one. Do you think I should start looking at venues? Just for fun? You'd tell me if something changed, right? That one made my throat close up. Something had changed. Or maybe nothing ever had. Maybe this me, in a new city, curled up in a borrowed Airbnb while he juggled lives, was the plan all along. I wanted to scream. Or throw the ring. Or call someone. But who? My parents? My old roommate back in DC? What do you even say? Hi. I gave up my career and flew across the world for a man who apparently has 2 fiancés. It didn't feel real. It felt like someone else's story. But the one thing I knew clear as glass was that I wasn't going to sit in that apartment and wait for him to come home and lie to my face. Not after that. So I packed my bag, grabbed the iPad and the ring box, and left. I didn't have a plan, just a screenshot of the receipt, the address. It was about a 15-minute walk away, an older building tucked in a quiet, leafy part of Gracia, with ivy on the walls and a tiny brass plaque that read Edifici Solaire, the kind of place that screamed long-term, local, not tourist. My hands were sweating as I buzzed the apartment number on the receipt. No answer. I was about to leave when the door swung open from the inside. And there she was. She was wearing a green dress and no makeup, her hair pulled up in a soft bun. She looked effortless, like the kind of woman who made Sunday mornings look cinematic. For a full second, we just stared at each other. Then she spoke. Are you the realtor? I blinked. No. I couldn't get the words out. My heart was punching through my ribs. She tilted her head. You okay? I looked her straight in the eyes and said the only thing I could think to say. I think we're engaged to the same man. Her face went pale. And then she whispered, Micah? That's when it happened. Not screaming, not crying. She laughed. A sharp, bitter, breathless laugh. Like someone who just realized the punchline of a cruel joke they were the center of. She stepped aside and gestured for me to come in. I was wondering how long it would take. Wait, what? She poured 2 glasses of wine without asking and slid one toward me like we were old friends meeting for gossip. And then, calm as anything, she said, he did the same thing to a girl in Lisbon last year. You're not the first. You probably won't be the last. I held the wine glass without drinking it, hands stiff and buzzing with adrenaline. Isabel, on the other hand, took a long sip like she'd been preparing for this conversation long before I ever landed in Spain. She didn't ask for my name. She didn't need to. So, she said, settling onto a velvet couch that probably cost more than my rent back home. How long were you with him? 2.5 years. She let out a low whistle. Wow, longer than me. I stared. You knew? She shrugged. Not about you. Not until just now. But about the others? Yes. I blinked, heart pounding. You said Lisbon. Isabel nodded. Last spring. Her name was Renata. Freelance photographer. He met her at a conference. Said he was single. Took her to Paris for her birthday. Proposed in Montmartre with a ring he later lost. She found out when she posted about him on Facebook, and one of my coworkers saw it. I felt like I was sinking. Why did you stay? She looked at me for a long time before answering. Because I thought I was the real one, the main one. He told me she was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that he didn't even love her. And honestly, her voice cracked slightly. I wanted to believe that. Because believing the truth meant admitting I'd fallen in love with a professional liar. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. All this time, I thought I was sacrificing for love, that we were building something rare, something worth fighting for. And he'd been doing the same thing to other women, using that same soft voice, those same forehead kisses, those promises of forever like they were currency he could just spend over and over again. I pulled the ring box from my bag and placed it on her coffee table. "Do you know about this?" She stared at it like it was something radioactive. Then slowly, very carefully, she opened it. Her breath caught. "I thought he hadn't bought it yet," she whispered. "So it was for you?" She nodded once, silent. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just two women sitting in the ruins of the same relationship, surrounded by the same empty promises dressed in different accents. "He told me I was his plot twist," I muttered. Isabel smiled sadly. "He told me I was his turning point." I almost laughed. Then Isabel said something I didn't expect. "I've been trying to catch him in the lie. That's why I gave him this address. I wanted to see if he'd bring someone here. And now here you are." I looked at her, stunned. "So this was a trap?" "In a way, yes. But not for you." Her eyes locked onto mine. "I think he's been doing this a long time. And I think he's finally gotten sloppy." I sat back, letting the truth settle in. Micah wasn't just a guy with commitment issues. He wasn't even just a cheater. He was a collector, a chameleon, a man who built women up just to watch them unravel around him. And somehow, we'd all mistaken that for love. Somewhere between the ring, the wine, and the grief-glazed silence, Isabel and I stopped being strangers and started being something else. Not friends, exactly. Not yet, but co-conspirators, survivors of the same emotional scam artist. We sat in her kitchen, both slightly shaky, sketching out a plan like it was a stakeout scene from a Netflix drama. "I just want him to see what he's done," Isabel said, tapping her manicured nail against her wine glass. "No more smooth talking, no more dodging. He thinks he can juggle women like it's a magic trick." I nodded. "So let's pull back the curtain." It was simple. We knew Micah would be at the rooftop bar of El Tarot that evening. He'd made plans with Isabel earlier that week. She hadn't canceled. And now, she wasn't going to. We'd both show up. Together. I was terrified. Not because I feared him physically. Micah wasn't that kind of danger. But because I feared how small I might feel when I looked him in the eye. How easy it might be to crumble, to question, to want the version of him I thought I knew. But I also knew this. I'd given up everything for a man who had multiple versions of himself. And it was time he met the real me. The rooftop was golden with sunset when we arrived. Candlelit tables, jazz drifting through the speakers. It was the kind of place where people took anniversary photos and posted them with captions like "blessed." Micah was already there, leaning casually against the railing, drink in hand, looking out over the city like a man at peace with his perfectly compartmentalized life. He turned when he heard Isabel's heels. His smile froze when he saw me beside her. And then, I saw it. Not shock, not guilt, just calculation. He straightened, quickly smoothing his expression into something gentle. "Hey," he said slowly, like we were both overreacting toddlers he could calm with the right tone. "This is unexpected." "No," Isabel said, "it's overdue." I stepped forward, pulling out my phone. Want to guess how many messages Isabel's seen? Or Renata? Or me? For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Maybe fear. Maybe annoyance. "You're being dramatic," he said flatly. "This isn't what you think." "No." I cut him off. "It never was. That's the point." A few heads turned. Someone nearby raised an eyebrow. But we didn't care. "Let them watch." "Why?" Isabel asked, voice tight. "Why pretend? Why string us along when you had no intention of staying?" He looked between us, jaw twitching. "Because it was easier," he muttered finally. "You were both different things I needed. You, Isabel, steady. And you," he glanced at me, "you believed in me so hard. I almost believed it too." The honesty hit harder than the lies. But just as I opened my mouth to respond, she walked in. A woman I didn't recognize. Tall, brunette, maybe mid-30s. She walked straight to our little confrontation circle with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was there for. She looked at Micah, then at me, then at Isabel, and said, "You must be the other ones. I'm Claire. We were supposed to get married last October." For a second, no one spoke. Claire just stood there, arms crossed, wearing this calm, tight smile that felt more like a knife. The kind of smile you only learn after being burned by the same person over and over again. Micah turned pale, visibly pale. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. Isabel was the first to break the silence. "Wait, last October?" Claire nodded. "He ghosted me 3 days before the wedding. Disconnected his phone, blocked my number, told my parents he'd had a personal emergency, and never showed up again." My stomach flipped. Wedding? She gave me a tired look. In Italy. Villa. 40 guests. My dad had already flown in from the Philippines. I still have the dress. It's in storage. I couldn't breathe. Micah looked around, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies. Me, Isabel, Claire. 3 women with receipts, rage, and enough emotional shrapnel to level an entire therapy group. He ran a hand through his hair, stepping back like the truth was something physical pressing in on him. I know how this looks, he said finally, his voice cracking. But none of you were fake to me. I almost laughed, Micah. You bought an engagement ring for 2 different women. Maybe more. How many rings are there? 3, Claire said quietly. He gave me mine in Florence. After dinner. It had a twisted band, he said. It symbolized how our paths had finally aligned. I almost gagged. I bet he reused that line. He looked at her, guilt radiating off him like heat. That wasn't a lie, he whispered. I meant it that night. You meant it? Isabel scoffed. Which time? When you kissed me goodbye before flying to DC, or when you texted Renata that you were dreaming about her in Paris. Micah sat down abruptly on the low wall bordering the rooftop, like his legs just gave out. He looked at each of us, really looked like he was taking inventory of the damage. You don't understand, he said quietly now. You were all different versions of home to me. When I was with Claire, it was peace. When I was with Isabel, it was stability. When I was with you, he turned to me, it was possibility. I clenched my fists. Micah, you didn't build a home. You built a museum, you curated women. We weren't people to you. We were exhibits. He flinched. But I wasn't done. You loved being loved. That's it. You loved how we looked at you like you were the sun. And the moment any of us wanted more, you disappeared. He didn't deny it. Claire, standing just behind me, pulled a small envelope from her bag and tossed it in his lap. That's the deposit receipt for the venue. 50% non-refundable. Congratulations. You bought a villa and a lawsuit. His face crumpled. Finally. But Isabel leaned in, and what she said was quieter, colder. I hope one day you realize that being chosen means nothing if you can't stay. He didn't speak again. We left him there, 3 women, descending from a rooftop like survivors of some emotional war. I didn't even look back. That night, I slept on Isabel's couch. Claire slept in the guest room. None of us talked much. It was a silence that somehow felt louder than a scream. But the next morning, something cracked open in me. It wasn't closure. Not yet. But it was the start. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since Barcelona became synonymous with heartbreak. Since I walked away from the man I thought I'd spend my life with, only to find out I was one of many chapters in his story, all labeled temporary. And somehow, I was still here, still breathing, still functioning, still waking up every morning and making my own coffee, even if it tasted like regret for a while. After the confrontation, Isabel helped me find a short-term sublet, a tiny 1-bedroom in I example, with squeaky floorboards and a view of someone else's laundry line. But it was mine, my space, my quiet, my healing. Claire flew back to London a few days later. She hugged me before she left, long and tight, and said, "You're going to be okay. You already are." And I believed her a little more than I expected to. Isabel and I stayed in touch. Weekly coffee dates. Occasional texts that just said, "Saw a man in tortoiseshell glasses," almost through my iced latte. Micah had gone silent. No calls. No texts, no pop-up apologies on Instagram. I figured he was hiding out, licking his wounds, or maybe doing what he always did, starting fresh with some new woman who hadn't yet seen behind the curtain. Good. Let her find the red flags the hard way. I was done being a warning label for someone else's healing. I started taking Spanish classes, freelancing again, rebuilding routines that felt like me, not us. I even walked past the old rooftop bar once and didn't flinch. But then, on a random Tuesday morning, I woke up to a new notification on my phone. Unknown number. I'm sorry, but I never told you the whole story. I stared at it for a full minute. My throat went dry. I knew that number. I deleted it, but my gut recognized it instantly. Micah. There were no follow-ups, no voicemails, just that one text, sitting there like a ghost waiting to be acknowledged. I wanted to ignore it, but of course I didn't. I tapped, read. Another message appeared instantly, like he'd been waiting. It wasn't just you 3. There was someone before all of you. Her name was Mara. She disappeared. And I think you deserve to know why. I blinked. Mara? Who the hell was Mara? My chest tightened. Not with heartbreak this time, but with something colder. Dread. I stared at that text until the screen dimmed. Mara. She disappeared. It sounded like the plot of a psychological thriller, not the man I once thought I'd marry. But something about it, his tone, the precision of her name. She disappeared. It didn't feel like guilt. It felt like fear. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Isabel with a single caption. "Do you know about Mara?" She called immediately. "No. Who the hell is Mara?" I told her everything. The text, the name, the eerie silence that followed. "I don't know what this is," I said, pacing my tiny apartment, heart racing. "But I can't shake the feeling that this is bigger than just cheating." Isabel was quiet for a second. "Come over. We're digging." By 11 a.m., we were sitting at Isabel's dining table with 2 lattes, 3 devices, and way too many open browser tabs. We searched every combination. Micah last name Mara, Micah engaged before 2021. Disappearance Barcelona Mara engagement. Called off, Micah hours passed. My eyes burned. Nothing came up. Just public records of Micah's nonprofit work, a few tagged photos from charity events, an alumni listing from his college. But then Isabel's voice broke the silence. Wait, look at this." She angled her screen toward me. It was a comment on an old blog post from a site about digital nomad couples. The post was dated 3 years ago. The headline read, "We left the 9 to 5 to work remotely together. Here's what we learned." The couple featured Micah and a woman named Mara G. Alvarez. There were photos. Him, younger looking but still smug. Her Latina, long dark curls, bright eyes, the kind of natural confidence that makes you stop scrolling. They were in Morocco, Thailand, Amsterdam, kissing in front of a waterfall. I felt like I was looking at ghosts. But what made my stomach twist wasn't the post, it was the comment section. One comment stood out. Username, Sister of Mara. "This is disgusting. Mara is missing and you're still monetizing her image? Micah, how dare you? Tell the truth, or we will." Isabel sat back. "What? The stir. Hell." I clicked the username. It was linked to a dead profile. But now we had something. A name. A timeline. A disappearance. I couldn't breathe. "He said she disappeared," I whispered. "What does that mean?" Isabel was already searching. "Okay, Mara G. Alvarez. Let's see what you didn't want us to know." 30 minutes later, we found a Reddit thread, buried in a true crime forum. Title, "Digital Nomad Gone Missing in 2021. Anyone remember this? Post details were sparse. Mara Alvarez, 27. Last seen in Lisbon, where she and her boyfriend were supposedly living for a few months. No activity on her socials since March of that year. Her phone last pinged near a train station. And the kicker? Her boyfriend was never formally investigated, but her family still believes he knows more than he's saying." My blood ran cold. Micah had lived with Mara, traveled with her, built a life with her, and then she vanished. He didn't just have commitment issues, he had a pattern. And now he was texting me. The next day, I agreed to meet him. Not out of hope, not for some twisted sense of closure, just to look him in the eye one last time and ask the question I now couldn't sleep without hearing the answer to. What happened to Mara? We met at a quiet cafe, tucked into a side street in Pobblesec. He chose it, probably because it was low-key, local, invisible. The kind of place no one would recognize him. That used to feel romantic. Now it felt strategic. He was already sitting when I arrived, looking thinner, paler, like someone who hadn't slept. I didn't care. I didn't sit, just stood there, heart pounding in my ears. "Tell me about Mara," I said. He looked up slowly, and to my shock, he didn't deflect, didn't lie. He nodded, once, and said, "I figured you'd find her eventually." That made my stomach turn. "She disappeared. What does that mean, Micah? What did you do?" He closed his eyes for a long moment before speaking. "We were together for almost 4 years, met at a remote work retreat in Bali. She was electric, the kind of person who made every stranger feel like a lifelong friend. I didn't know who I was until I met her, and that was the problem. I didn't say anything. She had this plan," he went on, "to build a life off the grid, travel, work online, live slow. She didn't want a mortgage or a 401k, and for a while I loved that. I thought I could be that person too." He looked down at his hands, but then she wanted more, a place to settle, a dog, maybe kids someday. I panicked. I didn't say anything. I just started pulling away. She could feel it. She always could. So one day, she left. "Left? Where?" I demanded. "You said she disappeared. She left our apartment in Lisbon, said she was going for a walk to clear her head. She never came back." The silence between us was deafening. "You didn't call the police?" I asked, voice low. He looked away. I thought she needed space. I figured she was punishing me. I waited a few days, and by then, it felt too late. Her family never liked me. They assumed the worst. They still assume the worst. I didn't hurt her, he said quickly. I swear to you. I didn't lay a hand on her. But I did abandon her emotionally. I left her to carry everything while I floated above it all, pretending I was still in love. That was my specialty, right? He let out a broken laugh, loving the idea of someone, not the real thing. I stared at him, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Part guilt, part confession, all of it soaked in regret, but not accountability. You collect women like souvenirs, I said. You get high off being adored, but when it gets real, when it asks anything of you, you run. Or worse, you rewrite the story. His eyes welled up. I never meant to do this to you. But you did. And you meant it every time before too. I turned to leave, but he called out. Wait, there's more. Mara's sister. She found me last year, said Mara was spotted. In Berlin. I froze. She's not missing. Not dead. Just done with me. Off the grid. No social media. No paper trail. She wanted out. And she took it. Then why didn't you say that before? He looked up at me. Hollow. Because letting people believe she was gone gave me a story to hide behind. And I wanted pity more than truth. That was the moment it clicked. He hadn't just broken hearts. He'd weaponized them. When I walked away from that cafe, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt clear. Micah hadn't killed anyone, not physically. But he'd emotionally gutted every woman who trusted him. Left us tangled in half-truths and question marks. Built entire futures out of phrases like, "You're the one and we're just getting started," only to burn it all down the second it got real. And then hide behind stories like she disappeared. Not anymore. That night, I sat down with my laptop and pulled everything together. Screenshots, dates, voice notes, his text to Isabel, Claire's invoice, a screenshot of the Reddit post about Mara, my photos from Lisbon, one of him holding my hand on a rooftop with a caption that now read like satire, "Lucky to build a life with her." I opened Medium and wrote a post titled, "The Man with Multiple Fiancés, a cautionary tale in real time." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even emotional. It was just the truth. Every word documented, every timeline laid out, every woman anonymized except Micah. I used his full name, his job title, his city, not out of revenge, but because he moved through the world like a ghost with a charm offensive. And we deserved a warning label. I hesitated before hitting publish. Not because I doubted what I'd written, but because I knew what came next. Once it's out there, it can't be undone. I clicked, published. I closed my laptop and waited. The next morning, my phone exploded. It started small. A few reposts, comments from women saying, "This is horrifying," and familiar. Then it picked up speed. By noon, it had been shared on Twitter over 4,000 times. By dinner, someone posted it to a popular Reddit relationship thread. By midnight, it was on BuzzFeed's Rising Stories sidebar. I got DMs from people who knew Micah from college, coworkers, even a woman who said she almost moved in with him 3 years ago. Another said he offered to help her get a partner visa to Portugal last summer. And then someone I didn't expect, Mara's sister. She sent a message that stopped my breath. "I just read your post. I'm Mara's sister. She's alive. And she's seen what you wrote." My fingers hovered over my keyboard, too afraid to respond. Then she sent another. "She wants to talk to you, if you're willing." When Mara called me, I almost didn't answer. I'd been pacing my apartment all morning, phone in hand, heart in my throat. The woman whose name had haunted the second half of my relationship, the woman who vanished, whose story Micah had twisted into tragedy for sympathy, was calling me directly. I swiped to answer. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, confident, not what I expected. "Hi, this is Mara." Silence for a beat. "Thank you for writing what you did." I sat down slowly. "You're real." She laughed softly. "Last I checked." And then, like two strangers linked by the same storm, we talked. She told me everything. How she met Micah in Bali. How magnetic he was at first. How quickly he integrated into her life. "It felt like destiny," she said. "But now, I know it was design." He mirrored her every dream. Said he wanted the same things. Said all the right things. But slowly, subtly, he chipped away at her confidence. Made her question herself, her goals, her intuition. "He never hit me," she said. "He never screamed." But by the end, I was a ghost in my own relationship, apologizing for asking to be loved. One day, she packed a backpack and left, took a train out of Lisbon, turned off her phone, deleted every account, stayed with a friend in Berlin and started over. "Everyone thought I went missing," she said. "And maybe, for a while I did. For myself." She paused. "When I saw your post, it was like watching someone pull back the curtain I spent years hiding behind." My throat tightened. "Why are you talking to me?" Because I needed to say this out loud to someone who understands. You're the first person who does. We sat in that silence together, two women Micah had tried to edit into side characters. But we weren't. We were the authors now. Before we hung up, she said one more thing. You reminded me that survival isn't the end of the story. Reclaiming it is.